Welcome to this webinar, part 4 of the webinar set of First Steps with Transit NXT. This recording shall accompany you while taking first steps with Transit NXT Professional and Transit NXT Freelance Pro. Please be aware of the fact that Transit NXT Freelance Pro has some restrictions compared to Transit NXT Professional. This webinars will cover functionalities which are available in both versions. This is part 4 of a set of 4 webinars. In webinar part 4, you will see how to prepare and finish an enhanced translation project, sophisticated translation by using reference material and terminology, and further proofreading options. All translations start with a file, so let's have a look at the file we are going to process first. We have again a PowerPoint file, but this time it has more slides, and it is very similar to the files we have processed in the first project. Again, this needs to be translated from English into German. Together with this lecture PowerPoint presentation, we have a Word file. This is supposed to be like a handout which is to be spread out after the lecture. And it has like a summary of all the most important things of the lecture. These 2 files need to be processed in Transit and translated into German. Since we recognize that these files are very similar to the ones we have already translated, we want to use the files of the first project. Then we want to start creating our own terminology. Let me show you the enhanced workflow of a project like this. Again, we have the original file or files which are to be processed with Transit. Now we have a dictionary and reference material. And the first step is always the project definition, where we indicate, for example, the source and target language. Since we have reference material and a dictionary, we can already indicate them in the project definition right from the start. The next step is the import, where the language pair is created. Since we have indicated reference material, the so-called pre-translation can take place. During the pre-translation, the reference material is used to translate 100% identical matches in the target language file. That's why we see it here already a little bit in red. During the import, we can also create a PDF file. The next step is the work in the editor. Here, we use the current language pairs and the reference material for dual fuzzy matches, dual concordance search, and for context. The dictionary is used for using terminology or creating new terminology in the dictionary. The PDF file serves for layout context and for the synchronized view. After the work in the editor and all the proofreading, the target file is all in the target language and is ready for the export, where the target language file is transformed again into its original format. Now, let me show you this workflow, how we do this in Transit NXT. We start Transit NXT. And again, the first dialog we get is the user role dialog. We select the super user. Then we get the project selection dialog. We can click here, create new project, or we can use this icon, create project. Both options leads us to this slide, to this dialogs. We create our new project using a template. We select the MS Office template, which is here. Since we have a PowerPoint file and a Word document, we click on Next. We indicate the name. So this is project number 2, and the rest can stay as it is. Next, I have to indicate the source. Source is English UK, and the target is German. In general, the languages appear in alphabetical order. German occurs here at first position because I can determine my so-called working languages in the user preferences, that I have them ready at hand at the first positions. I define German as my working language. Now we are prompted to the reference card for the working folder. Transit will create a working folder for us in the Transit installation folder, under project folder, and the working folder will get the name of my project. Next. The file type, the filter we use is MS Office. Now we select the import files. I click on Select Folder, and I am prompted to this folder, which I have predefined in my user preferences, because I have one folder where all my original files are stored. So I click on here and open. Next. I have reference material for this, which I want to use right from the start. I click on Add Folder, and again, that I am prompted to this folder is predefined by myself in the user preferences. I want to use all my references, all my material I have done for food congresses, so I click on Open. Next. Now I am prompted to the dictionaries reference card. I want to add my own dictionary, which is glossary, and I want to add the health dictionary in addition. Maybe you've noticed when we take this way, we get prompted more reference cards. Next. As soon as the dictionary is indicated, it will open in the background. I click on Finish. The next step after the project definition is always the import. Yes, I want to do the import now. We get the import dialog, and here we have German as a target language. And for this project, we want to also have PDF files, which are created of the original files, that I can have a look at the PDF files for further research or information during the translation. And I start the import. We have a green traffic light. The import is completed successfully. So we have now language pairs which are pre-translated already during the import using the existing reference material. We close the import dialog. All the way on top, we see which project is open. And if you want to check the project settings, we click here. We have the languages, the folder, file type, the files, reference material, and dictionaries. All the other reference cards can, of course, be changed by yourself also. If you do not want so, they have default settings which are used by default for every project. Okay. Let's open language pair. We have two files, so we have two language pairs. We can open both language pairs in one window. I do so. And if we want to see where is the next file, we can either scroll down. There it starts from, the counting starts from the beginning again, or we can just use the element of the toolbar which is called file navigation. We can hop from one file to another. Just imagine that you have more than two files and you want to work on them in one window set. So you can easily navigate from one to another. We have created a PDF file for each file we have imported. If we want to have a look at the PDF file, we use the so-called PDF viewer. This is also an element of the toolbar, and in this case it is set up or defined that it's floating in as soon as I touch the icon. Here you see a red frame. This red frame is synchronized to the segment where my cursor is at the moment in the language pair. The synchronization to the language pair goes from PDF to language pair and vice versa. This element of the toolbar, the PDF viewer, is defined as a floating window that I have still enough space to do my translation work, and that it's only opened when I need the information. When we have a look at the details of the language pair, we see here that we have here different symbols. These symbols stand for the segment status. Right after the import, we can have a plus here, which means this segment is 100% pre-translated. We do not have to touch it anymore. That's why some segments are already in German. Let's start do the translation. I go to the first to be translated segment, and I receive a fuzzy match for this. The source fuzzy window is has always the same structure. First, we get the minimum quality. Then we see here the path leading to the language pair where my segment comes from. In the first line, we see the reference segment as it is in the reference material. Then we see in the file, in the line 2, we see how it is now, our to be translated segment. And in this line, we see the translation, how it is in the reference material. The difference between these two segments or these two sentences is here. It's a textual change. So we can just do our textual change here and take it over with the key combination Alternate Enter. Then it receives the hash sign symbolizing that this is a fuzzy match, that this is translated by a fuzzy match. And I click on Alternate Insert in order to mark it as translated. And now, in addition, it receives a little star. My cursor is now in segment number 8. I have no fuzzy match, so I have to do the translation from scratch. I use the method to just push the to be translated text ahead of the cursor. You can also define it that the segment is emptied as soon as you enter it. Everything which is on top of this red circle line will be deleted as soon as I mark this segment as translated. And the cursor goes to the next segment. Here, when we have a look, we do also have a textual change, but in this case, it's rather stylistic. The German translation might be valid for both. To get more information, if we can just use this information, let's have a look at more context. We use this icon for this. We do a double click here, and we receive a third tab here, and this is exactly the language pair where this segment comes from. And since we saw the complete file, we can easily read the context and decide, okay, yes, let's use the prompted translation. I have just closed this tab in order to get back to my current language pair. I just take over this match and mark it as translated. Here, we receive more than one fuzzy match. Let's concentrate on the first one. We have several changes here. We have a textual change, we have a number change, and we have here a difference in markup, in formatting. Transit presents us here one line more, showing us that Transit has helped us translating this. It has adapted the number, and it has adapted the formatting by deleting the formatting. So I can take this match over as it is and mark it as translated. But now I see that I have to adapt the markup also. So I can mark here my translation, which corresponds to carbohydrates in the source, and press the key combination of the ID number and assign the markup here. And I mark this as translated. In this segment, I want to show you how we can add markups automatically on the fly of translation. I start translating, and now I want to translate complex. Complex has formatting, and the formatting here is represented by a markup ID number, which is number 2. If we want to know what this number 2 stands for in this segment, we go to the markup window, look up number 2, and then the formatting is shown. And in this case, it stands for bold. So if we want to add the formatting on the fly to my translation, we just need to know the markup ID number, which is number 2 here. I press Control and markup number 2 and just continue typing. To leave the markup, I just press the cursor arrow to the right and continue. Einfache, komplexe und Ballaststoffe. And now I just can press alternate insert in order to mark it as translated. In this segment, we have carbohydrates marked in yellow. Yellow always stands for terminology. And here, let's have a look at the terminology window. Carbohydrates is Kohlenhydrate in German. If I want to use this term from the terminology window, I just use a key combination to insert it at the position I need it. I start translated, press the corresponding key combination, and continue translating. Now I want to translate milk. Milk has a formatting. In this case, it is markup ID number 1. This is all I need to know. press the key combination, translate milk, leave the markup with the cursor arrow to the right, and continue translating. Now I want to insert Obst into my dictionary. All I have to do is I have to mark fruits, which is the corresponding translation in the source, and Obst in the target. Go to the tab Terminology and use the Rapid Entry mode. In this dialog, I get my 2 terms suggested. I can check if I want to insert it like this, and I click on Save. And as soon as I close the Rapid Entry mode, it is inserted into the dictionary and ready to use for the next time. And now I can mark my segment as translated. In this segment, we also get terminology, but in this time I ignore the information which I get there. Now I see that my translation has a special underlining. It is yellow, and yellow always stands for terminology. So I have a look at my terminology window now, and I see that brauner Reis is marked as a so-called disallowed term. I'm not allowed to use this term in my translation. This can be either determined by myself in the dictionary to help me to remember, or if you have different customers of the same branch, you can define certain terms which are by all means are not to be used for one customer or the other. So if we want to insert the correct term, we can just mark here and then do a double click and insert it as it is. And now I can press alternate insert in order to mark this as translated. Next segment. Again, I want to show you something about terminology. Now I want to translate unrefined food sources. When I have a look at my terminology window, I see that source has 2 translations, and I have no further information coming from my dictionary. I can use the so-called dynamic linking, which we see here. This little icon stands always for reference material. It is the same icon we just saw in the fuzzy source window. If I click this icon in the terminology window, the dynamic linking window pops up and shows us example segment pairs where sources was translated by Herkunft. And I see the whole sentence, and maybe I get an idea if I should take Herkunft. I can do the same for Quelle. Again, I get prompted segment pairs coming from certain reference language pairs, telling us where source has been translated with Quelle. If this is not enough context for me, I even find this icon here. I could double click here and get the whole file for more context. Okay, so I can read all these suggestions and decide how I want to translate source in this case, and I decide to translate it in unverarbeitete Nahrungsquellen, like this, and I mark it as translated. This segment does not have any fuzzy match, and it has terminology. So I just start translating. Now I get a fuzzy match, which is based on the target, meaning as soon as I have typed 2 words and there was no fuzzy match based on the source, I get a fuzzy match based on the target. I see that it's based on the target from the color of this pointer and the color here. Everything which has to do with the target is marked in red, you see also here, and everything which has to do with the source is marked in green, as you see here and here. So, Transit helps us to formulate new translations by looking up similar phrases in the target, in all target segments of all the reference material. It helps us to stay stylistically coherent, or maybe I can even recycle a whole sentence. In this case, I get some grammar ideas to translate my new sentence like this. And as soon as the target match is not valid anymore, it disappears and gives room to continue. Now I take over the terminology, and I just mark it as translated. In this segment, we have several things to say. It's terminology, as we see in the terminology window, but our terminology suggestions differ. We have source, okay, which has these 2 target terms, and we have supply with this target term. But the highlighting of our letters here, which identify the data record in the terminology window, the highlighting color is different. This shows us that this terminology suggestion comes from the dictionary, and this terminology suggestion comes from markup, meaning somewhere in the reference material, supply was translated with Versorgung, and it carried a formatting. Due to our markup ID numbers, we can identify terminology data records and even present them in the terminology window. We can use them as any other terminology suggestion from the dictionary. Okay, so we can start translating. Again, match based on the target. Sichern. Now I want to translate adequate. In this case, we see we have 2 markup ID numbers, meaning that adequate carries 2 formattings. I just have to type the first one, because if there is more than one, we just group them, handle them as one. So I just press here. And you see, both formattings are assigned to this string automatically. I leave the markup and start and continue translating, and I can use my terminology of my terminology window. And if I even see that I have done a translating mistake, I can just go back and correct and press alternate insert in order to mark this as translated. Now we have a segment where we have lots of textual changes, and we see that nutrition facts is not represented in our fuzzy match. But we have no idea how to translate nutrition facts. We are not sure. So we can do a concordance search for this. We mark nutrition facts, go to the reference card matches, and click on Search. Now we see that this window is on top of my window set here. It is also an element of the toolbar. If we want to have this also as a floating in window, we just grab it, and as soon as we grab it, we get this coordinate. And I want to have it here, and I want to have it as a floating in window, floating in on demand. Okay? And now I get, again, all the segment pairs showing me where nutrition fact is in the source. I could also look up only in the target files. So I get an idea by reading through all these suggestions of how to translate nutrition facts. And as soon as I leave the window, it closes and it's ready for usage here. So I see here. I have here terminology. Now I need to translate major energy source. And here we go. Press alternate insert to mark it as translated. Here we have again a fuzzy match, but we see that diseases is not translated here. We have no terminology for disease, so let's look this one up in the internet. So we do a so-called web search. We find the web search here, and we type in the word we need, or we just do copy-paste, disease, and search. Now we get all the search engines available for English. We just deactivate these. That knows it's just for an example. Okay? Now, as soon as we have it here, a go, Transit has found something for us in Wiktionary, for example, and it's a green bubble here. We click on go, and we receive the information the internet is giving us for disease. Okay, then let's look up Google. Simple page, we see disease is translated like Krankheit. By the way, this is also an element of the toolbar, and it can also be defined as a floating in element. Now we know that disease can be translated with Krankheit. I close it, and I just translate. Okay, press alternate insert in order to mark it as translated. Now we have reached the second file, and Transit automatically went to the second file and continued with showing us fuzzy matches. Now I can take over this match and just do my textual adaptation here, and here we have also a formatting. This formatting stands for a graphic in this case. We can display graphics either in the PDF viewer, showing us the whole file, or if we need more graphic detail, we have the media viewer, which can also show us a graphic. Okay, so we have translated here, and we click alternate insert in order to mark it as translated. Our work is done, and let's save the language pairs here. Mostly proofreading now takes place after the translation. Everything which has to do with review can be found here. Again, we have the spell checking here. And now let me show you that we can also have a terminology check. This check just compares the translation with the dictionary. And if we did not use the term as it is in the terminology window, Transit presents us a sentence and tells us that the target term in the dictionary for health was not used. Select the term that you wish to allow in the rest of the project. So health was not used, and we translated it as gesund instead of Gesundheit. So we would just say allow. I click on cancel now. I just want to show you one example. The next checks we can do are format checks. In addition to the check of all the formatting, we can check numbers if they apply to the country standard. And we can have here several more formal checks, like check for double spaces and autocorrect them, or check end punctuation, or check for leading blanks, trailing blanks, and autocorrect them. I click on OK, and let's start. Punctuation at the end of segment is different. Should it be corrected? Yes. We have here no full stop, but a full stop is here. Yes, and check. Now it's inserted. OK. Now we can do a right mouse click and start here. I just click on yes, and the check is complete. Now let's save our language pairs, and our work in the editor is done. Next step in the workflow is the export. Everything which has to do with project management is done in the reference card project. Export. We start the export for German. It's completed successfully. And now let's have a look at the exported files. We open the export folder. The export folder is located in the working folder, and the working folder is located here. Let's open up the PowerPoint file. Let me make it bigger. And we see it is translated into German. Let's have a look at the doc file, at the Word document. Graphic is here since we inserted the formatting. Perfect. So these files are ready to deliver, and our enhanced project is done. As a summary, I close this one. I close here, minimize here, go back to Transit. As a summary of this part 4 of webinar set is that all the key combinations which I have used here can be found in the user's guide. And you can set all the settings according to your needs, meaning the user role, the window set, the view of the language pair. This can everything be set according to your needs. Then we have the user preferences, which you find here. At the user preferences, you find all kinds of settings which are ready for being set by you for your individual needs. The workflow is always the same, no matter what file format you process. And all steps can be repeated. I could repeat the export again and again if I want to. So this is all for part 4 of the webinars. I can close Transit, project settings, and the user preference reset. And if you have further questions, just turn to our common email address. Thank you for listening to this webinar, and lots of fun with Transit NXT.